When a building has lived its full life, is too broken to fix, or needs to make room for something new, it gets torn down. The way they do this is pretty amazing. They have to be super careful not to harm other buildings or people watching. But sometimes, things don't go the way they're supposed to, and that's where we come in. Let's dive into stories of demolitions gone wrong, from buildings falling in the wrong direction to hurting nearby structures. Here are 10 times when tearing down a building turned into a big problem. The Pontiac SilverDome. The Pontiac SilverDome was a big, well-known place in Pontiac, Michigan. This massive stadium could hold 83 people and was a famous spot in the NFL, home to the Detroit Lions. It opened in 1975 and hosted all sorts of events like NBA games, the FIFA World Cup, and even WrestleMania 3. After 25 years of being a big deal, a new place called Ford Field opened up in Detroit, and the SilverDome didn't have much to do. It stayed empty for 8 years until someone decided to sell it in 2017. Even though they tried to bring it back to life, the decision was made to tear it down, so they could use the 199-acre spot for something else. The plan was to break the stadium down in stages. In the first part, they wanted to use explosives to knock down the top part in December 2017. But when the time came, things didn't go exactly as planned. The explosives went off and there was some smoke, but the top part stayed put. The company in charge said a fraction of the explosives didn't work for some reason. They were sure it would fall eventually, but they couldn't say exactly when. To be safe, they came back the next day to finish the job. It took a few more months to take down the rest of the stadium. In 2019, they shared the news that Amazon would build a warehouse on the site. And just like that, the SilverDome, once a big deal, became a distant memory. Ohio Madison Power Plant. At number 14, we have the Ohio Edison Mad River Power Plant in Springfield. It opened its doors back in 1927, providing a big chunk of the town's power by burning coal. But because it was polluting the air, they decided to close it in 1981. It wasn't until 2010 that they brought in experts to tear it down so they could use the land for something else. The tricky part was dealing with the tall chimney stack. They carefully put explosives in the right spots, but there was a mistake. They didn't cut the steel bars well, used more explosives than usual, and set off the explosions with a delay. All these things together made the stack fall in a way no one planned. It didn't go where it was supposed to, and workers could only watch as it happened. When it fell, it wrecked 2 working turbines and knocked out 2 power lines, leaving over 4,000 homes without electricity for a while. The damage cost about $19 million. After that, there were big arguments in court about who was to blame. The power company pointed fingers at the demolition company they hired for not doing the job right. It took a long time to figure out who was at fault in the end. Australian beer silo. Let's talk about a funny mishap that happened in Australia back in 2010. Near Brisbane, there was this old silo that had been around for 50 years, helping make malt for a nearby brewery. But things changed, and they needed the land for a new train link to the city. So the decision was made to tear it down. The demolition crew tried to bring it down with a big blast, over 220 pounds of explosives inside. At first, it looked like it was working, but the silo didn't fully collapse. It kind of leaned to the side. The manager of the demolition company said there's always a risk, and it's tricky to use just the right amount of explosives. People nearby didn't know what would happen with this leaning tower now, but the experts had a plan B. It stayed tilted for about 40 minutes while workers removed more supports. Then a little push from an excavator was all it took to bring it down. Now, the hard part was cleaning up the 4,500 tons of rubble before they could start building something new. St. Petersburg Sports and Concert Complex. Let's talk about the St. Petersburg Sports and Concert Complex. It opened up in 1980 and was a big hub for fun in the area. It hosted all sorts of cool stuff: tennis matches, bowling competitions, and concerts by really famous artists. But like everything, it got old and needed to make way for something new. So they decided to tear it down in early 2020 to build the world's largest ice arena. Now, taking down a big place like this isn't as simple as just blowing it up. It needs careful planning. They have to figure out where all the weight is and make precise cuts to bring it down safely. But sadly, something went really wrong during this process. As workers were disconnecting the walls and roof of the stadium, it suddenly collapsed without any warning. Some workers were still inside and on top of the building, and not everyone could get away in time. One person lost their life and a few others got hurt. This is a tough example of how tricky it is to tear down buildings safely. It's a highly regulated job in most places around the world, but accidents like this show that even with all the rules, it's not always easy. Turkish flour factory. A notable incident captured on camera happened in Turkey in 2009. Workers were trying to clear an old factory to make room for a new shopping center. This 82-foot-tall building, once a flour factory, had been a vital part of the local economy since 1928. But it went out of business. And because it was so old, there were no records detailing exactly how it was built. Demolition experts had to make their best guess on how to proceed. When they felt ready, they set off explosives. However, instead of neatly falling to the ground as expected, one side of the building collapsed faster and it started leaning over. To everyone's surprise, it didn't stop there. It kept rolling and flipped over onto its roof, with most of the building still intact. This was a close call, landing frighteningly near a residential apartment. Luckily, a strong wall prevented significant damage. Leaning Tower of Dallas. In Dallas, Texas, in 2020, something unexpected happened during the demolition of an 11-story office building. The city had big plans for a new development worth billions of dollars, with homes, offices, and fun places. But standing in the way was this old office tower. People from all over the city gathered to watch it come down. The first explosives went off and everything seemed on track. Smoke came out of the windows, and then the big charges brought the building down. But here's the twist. The demolition team didn't realize that the elevator shaft was made from way stronger stuff than the rest of the building. It was built tough to handle the elevator mechanism and didn't crumble like the rest. When the dust settled, the shaft had fallen but was leaning to the side. It was too risky for workers to get close and finish the job. Some folks even wanted to keep it as a tourist attraction, calling it the Leaning Tower. But in the end, it was taken down by a wrecking ball so they could start the new construction project. Danish Silo. In April 2018, a big crowd gathered near a harbor in Bording, Denmark, eager to see a change in the skyline. An old silo, a tall structure that had been around for ages, was about to be demolished. This was part of a project to give new life to the old ferry town. Demolition experts carefully placed explosives at key points around the base of the silo. After making sure everything was set up right, they were ready to bring it down. They had even cut a large wedge from the structure to control how it fell. When they set off the charges, dust shot out, and people watching cheered. But the cheers turned to gasps when, instead of falling the way it was supposed to, the silo went in the opposite direction. The debris from the 173-foot tower rained down over the neighboring cultural center, which had a library and a music school. Firefighters worked all through the night to make sure the building was structurally safe. Luckily, they managed to save it, but there was already quite a bit of damage. The front wall got knocked through and the inside was covered in dust. It's fortunate that no one was inside at the time. This unexpected twist in the demolition taught everyone that things don't always go as planned. Chinese residential building. Building demolitions are tricky because each building is made differently. There's no one-size-fits-all plan, and careful thinking is needed before anything can happen. In December 2009, they were ready to bring down a 22-story residential building in Luzhou, China. But looking at the structure, you could tell it was no regular demolition. Due to the unique design of the building, the safest way to flatten it was to use explosives around the foundations. The idea was to split it in two, and both parts would fall separately. However, there was a big mistake. They didn't use nearly enough explosives. When they went off, one half of the building fell onto its side on the ground, but the other part just dropped a little and looked like it might fall over. It stayed at a dangerous slant, making it too risky for workers to go in and use more explosives. To finish the job, workers spent the next week taking it apart with a crane. Anglesea Power Station. Number 2 on our list is the Anglesea Power Station in Victoria, Australia. It started burning coal in 1969 to power an aluminum smelter. But when the smelter closed in 2014, there wasn't much need for the power station, and it was shut down later that year. In 2018, plans were set to demolish the building, leaving the chimney for later. However, the demolition didn't go as planned. Charges went off, creating a thick black smoke cloud. Some parts fell, but the rest stubbornly stood. This was a problem for the company in charge because it meant they had to make more attempts to bring down the building. On top of that, rumors started spreading about possible asbestos in the structure, a material that could be harmful. After a deep investigation, the power company was told they should have brought in experts experienced in demolishing such buildings. Fortunately, it didn't lead to more serious problems, but it was a lesson learned about the challenges of demolition. Toxic Smokestack. Now let's move on to number 1, the toxic smokestack in Little Village, Chicago. In 2020, residents faced an unexpected problem after the demolition of the Crawford coal-fired power plant, which had been in operation for a whopping 96 years before closing in 2012. The smokestack was surrounded by explosives, and as it fell, a massive amount of dust and debris went up into the air. People could hardly see in front of them, and the fine particles suspended in the air were a major concern. Tests showed that the particles might contain asbestos and various other harmful chemicals. Once things settled, the entire neighborhood was covered in a thin layer of debris, prompting a cleanup operation. The company responsible for the demolition faced questions about why they didn't minimize the dust cloud or warn locals about the potential risks. It was a challenging situation that highlighted the importance of careful planning in demolitions. Thanks for watching the video, and if you found it informative, please like and subscribe to Blueprint Journeys for similar content. We look forward to sharing more knowledge with you in the future. Until then, take care.